Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Motherhood's limited edition podcast series on all things influencer marketing. We are talking about everything that you can think of under the sun related to this industry, and it's been a lot of fun. So we're excited that you're here. I'm Cooper Monroe, and I'm CEO of The Motherhood, and I'm joined today by Deanna Tomaselli, our VP of Client Services. Hi.
Thanks, Cooper. So today we're talking with Michael Smart, who is the founder of Michael Smart PR. And this episode's really going to dive into how traditional media relations works well with influencer relations and why PR pros can use it into their whole communication strategy and mix, and talking about some of the best practices we've picked up along the way working with journalists and how it can be applied to influencer marketing. So it's a really good discussion, and we're excited to talk to Michael. Welcome, Michael Smart, to the podcast. Hi, Michael.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to have the tables turned, and it was great when you two were my esteemed guests, as you mentioned.
So you've created a brand around teaching PR people to get more coverage, whether it's online or broadcast or in print, whatever it may be, whatever their goals are. So what are you doing here today with two influencer marketing professionals?
Yeah, I think too many people, whether they're in PR or marketing more broadly, divide the functions by like who pays and who doesn't. I believe good PR is reaching my audiences through any third parties who my audiences trust. If the audience doesn't care if that third party is getting paid by me, I don't care. So I definitely want to know more about and practice good influencer marketing to be good at PR.
That's great. And I think the lines are blurring a lot these days, more than ever. But, in speaking with your members in your inner circle and those who are classically trained PR pros, so to speak, what kind of questions are you seeing that they have around influencer marketing and how they can kind of incorporate it? Are they kind of like hesitant about it because it's not technically earned media as they're used to and accustomed to?
Mostly, yes, that hesitancy is there, depending on the types of companies they rep and also on their age or experience level. So any PR pro in the lifestyle space, for example, knows that influencer marketing and affiliate work is where it's at. But in contrast, PR pros who deal with policy or legislative issues are understandably and justifiably, very resistant, as they should be. It is also a little funny that our more senior colleagues will confide in me privately. Okay, Michael, I know that you need to talk about influencer marketing, but I still am never going to be comfortable with the idea of paying for coverage. Like they can't get over that emotional or visceral reaction of putting this into a moral or ethical category where it's not really.
What do you think that is?
Just pure inertia. Like a lot of PR pros are former journalists, or they were kind of trained by the ethics of journalists. And it was like, you never pay, you never pay, you never pay. Only cheaters paid. Cheaters got caught, and they had a backlash in corporate reputation. The astroturfing by Walmart, back in the day, the very early influencer marketing, back when a lot of bloggers didn't take money, they did under the table. They just haven't made the leap that audiences know that Instagrammer is not wearing your jewelry because she loves it. She's wearing it because she loves it and she's getting paid to wear it.
So do you think that those folks had exploded when PR Daily 2023 predictions were that influencer relations is the new media relations?
Yeah, and I think part of the reason PR Daily framed it that way is to make those people's head explode, right, and get more conversation. That, like all good predictions, they took something where there's a lot of truth and then framed it in a sensational way. And so I definitely agree that influencer marketing is much more of the PR or marketing or marketing communications basket, whatever term you want to use. And it will, and I think the proportion vis-a-vis traditional media, will continue to grow, but I don't see media relations not being replaced by it. Certainly not.
But what's ahead where do you see that evolving in the mix?
Well, on a real, just to be practical and explain it in a concrete way, if there's a pie, right? If we have a pie graph and it's going to be a different proportion depending on which market or category you're in. But let's say if it's 50-50 already, I think that influencer marketing will creep into the half that's traditional media. If it's 75 traditional and 25 influencer, it'll creep in. If it's 99 traditional and 1% influencer, that's going to grow. And maybe we'll talk more about this later, but I'm including in influencer marketing a much larger basket of individuals and creators than the traditional, like, I'll pay you to talk about my product. It could be somebody, I guess I'm an influencer by this measure. I have a deal with a PR software brand, and I do webinars that aren't even about their software, but people sign up for them because they want to hear what I have to say about the industry, and then they get exposed to the software.
You are an influencer. And it's funny too, because when we talked to you before, when we did our masterclass, we shared examples of non-traditional and people who don't traditionally come off as an influencer. And I think that's another reason why a lot of these people who are more hesitant about influencer are, because they don't realize there's an influencer in every space. It's not just sharing lipstick or shoes to buy. There's a plethora of things people can be influenced in and channels to do so.
But that's not to say there's anything wrong with lipstick and shoes. And it's very, very effective at doing that.
Which brings me to a good point, because we just actually interviewed an editor from Ad Age, Phoebe Bain, and she wrote an article about a beauty brand who is actually using editors from traditional media as influencers themselves, because she was saying a lot of people are actually going, especially in the beauty industry, which you didn't think we are going to talk so much about beauty today, but people know that editors traditionally get these products and they're testing them and whatnot. And people are going to their Instagram or TikTok to see what they're testing and seeing. So it's interesting that she's, utilizing this and saying, hey, these editors are influencers, so to speak. Let me use that. So do you think that could be the case in other areas? And do you think that lessens a reporter or an editor's credibility, or does it strengthen it because they're kind of transparently showing these products in a different way?
That is a very interesting wrinkle that it does give rise to a lot of gray areas, in my opinion. And one of those wrinkles that comes first to mind, Deanna, that I can't get over. I'll just share it. It's not your issue or my issue, but if I'm the publisher of that magazine, I'm very concerned about that for two reasons. One, if an editor's using their platform on my property as cachet to cash in personally, if they're getting paid personally to talk about a beauty product, I want a cut of that or all of it, because the reason they're asking that editor is because of ostensibly her title, right? So that's an issue they have to work out. And the New York Times actually, like, they didn't come out and say, don't break news on Twitter, break it on the website to their journalists, but they kind of said it in every other way. Like, hey, we don't exist to build your Twitter following so that you can then migrate to Substack and get paid directly for your information that you can access because you can tell your sources you're a New York Times reporter. No, we pay you to break that news on our website. So same deal with this beauty brand you talk about. And by the way, Deanna, you quipped about talking about beauty. I obviously need all the help I can get. So, and anybody from that world, I love your tips. Back to your question. I don't know how I feel about editors doing that unless it's like blindly disclosed as sponsored right at the beginning. So if it's a video, hey, I'm Michael Smart, surprise makeup editor for website. I'm here doing a sponsored video with one of our sponsors. And the reason I like this product is because of this and this. Short of that, and as a publisher, I don't know if I would even want to do that. I think the last thing that traditional media has going for it is the perception of hands-off third-party credibility.
Where do affiliate links come into play here, or affiliate marketing?
Yeah, that's something evolves slowly and the audiences don't really notice at first, and then they realize they don't care. So as I understand, at least when I talk to PR pros who work in lifestyle product pitching, they say basically you got to have an affiliate link to show up in most of the best websites. And all of those, FTC requires it. All of them prominently say at the bottom and often at the top of the page, these are contain affiliate links, and Outside magazine that I visit a lot for outdoor products, Backpack Magazine, we get a commission on the sales. And I personally think my moral philosophy, for what little that's worth is great. These brands have to pay the bills somehow. And if they can't make money off the old display ad model, and they're making it now, great. I'd love to keep getting the content.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a little gray, but I think to your point, disclosing, making it very visible up front is what people need, because then they have all the information to make an informed decision. Do I want to keep reading or watching? Do I want to click? So I think that disclosure is super important.
Before we move on, Deanna, can I jump in with one more thing on this? Journalist as influencer. The grayest of areas, and your audience who's in PR will get this, and if they're outside of PR, I'm sorry if it's too nerdy, but there's this phenomenon of freelance journalists charging PR people for Substack newsletters that then tell the PR people how to pitch the Substacker for when they end up writing for Reader's Digest or whatever lifestyle article. I mean, it's like the most ingenious way of getting around the challenge of saying, here, I'll pay you if you cover my brand, that I've ever seen. And I just got to believe that their editors are okay with it for the same reason I said earlier. Like, these freelancers got to get paid somehow. The publishers don't have enough money to pay them what they're worth. And as long as there is no disclosure to the audience, though, it's not like they're saying, hey, I connected with this PR pro because they pay me for me to give them tips. So I think that's problematic. The bottom of this discussion in my mind is a lot of people, I don't know if it's most yet, don't trust the media anyway. So maybe the editors are just going to be like, okay, well, let's just cave and figure out a way that's financially viable for us.
So we talked about beauty, and we know you're not a beauty guru, so we'll move on. So we want to talk a little bit about, in this same vein, NPR wrote an article about Gen Z's political power. And I actually found this article from the Inner Circle Facebook group that Michael runs. But, Gen Z is making history with voter turnout, as we saw in the last election. And the report actually says Gen Z relies on social media for news instead of traditional media. And Michael, I loved the comment you chimed in with and said your 17-year-old announces the news of the day to your family that he gets from YouTubers. And with you and Cooper both having children in the Gen Z generation, I'd love to hear more about how they're consuming news. And do you think this is going to be kind of more of that blur between reporter and influencer, or are news platforms just going to have to continue to merge to these channels and use influencers as journalists to get the news out? So talk a little bit about your Gen Z children and how they're kind of weighing in with this.
I'll take this first, and then Cooper would love to hear your experience. I think it, rather than a shift from journalist to influencer, I think it's more a creator model. So I think both influencers and journalists fall under that rubric, and it's a style evolution. And if you think about it, before Cooper, before there was YouTube and all these multiple channels, we would still watch Saturday Night Live Weekend Update back when it was Kevin Nealon, right? All he would do is take the news as reported by traditional outlets that still do it and present it in a different way. And then, Jon Stewart made his whole career out of that. And I remember earlier, I don't remember which elections, Deanna, it was, when they were like, oh, X% of the electorate lists The Daily Show as their top source of news about the election. And there was hand wringing about that. So now it's just a YouTuber that I've never heard of that my son listens to. But the thing is that YouTuber has to rely on whatever insider, whatever the primary source of the news is, and they're just presenting it in a conversational way. And yeah, I think that will continue to influence traditional media. They'll change their voice in a somewhat dramatic departure from the line of your questioning. We talked earlier about Substack. It's built around an individual personality model for journalism. And as that has achieved traction, I've seen even the traditional publishers kind of copy that model. For example, I signed up for a subscription to the LA Times, and I started getting emails from them, which is normal. And one of them was this Substack-like personal introduction from the food editor. Like, here's a typical day for me. Here's where I get my samples. It's not something they would have ever done when I was a journalist 25 years ago. I don't think they would have done it 5 years ago. Like, why would a random subscriber care about a day in the life of the cooking editor? Well, the demand for Substack personality-driven news shows that people do care.
It's a really interesting comparison with Weekend Update and The Daily Show. It's like, this is the new Daily Show.
Yeah.
Even though The Daily Show is still a thing and Weekend Update's still a thing. It's like, and people are really deep diving now into things like with the Johnny Depp case last year. It was like, there was 1.5 million TikToks diving into their hot takes. And it's just a different way of people consuming and hearing about, what the trial is right now, or what this is or that. So it's a really interesting comparison.
And what a critical piece here, though, obviously, would be the accuracy.
Right.
It was so interesting about in advance of the most recent election, the influencers that kind of were the, I don't know how many, 10 or 15 of them were brought to DC, but they were also taken straight to these sources. They were briefed. They went to all these different meetings. There was such a emphasis on making sure that the information they were given was from the horse's mouth and completely accurate. And it was just, they were reporters. They were on the ground correspondents for that week before the election.
Can I jump in with something there? I think it will work at high level news events, like you just said, because they didn't have to pay those guys to go do that, right? Because they were essentially validating them. Like, hey, every influencer is like, hey, here I am at whatever the hard to get ticket is, right? But it's every other, the 99% of the rest of society that isn't serious enough to get me to cover it just because that makes me look cool. That suffers. The only way I'm going to cover that is if you pay me. Now, if I'm a brand, is that my problem? No. There's no reason why a brand should hesitate to pay an influencer to do that. And maybe as the public gets more accustomed to seeing influencers in traditional media roles, maybe that'll make it, the kind of typical brand buying, influence buying experience that brands are doing now even more effective.
Yeah. And I think too, just to go back to your point about the LA Times and the day in the life, it's like, if you go on TikTok, that's so much content right now. It's like a day in the life of this person or that person, or my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5, or whatever it is, and people are just looking at this content and want to see that behind the scenes, and they're consuming content differently too, because another medium that came out several years ago was The Skim. I used to subscribe to The Skim, and it would just digest the news for me in a way that I could read it and understand it, rather than being like, wait, what is this article saying? It's like, people don't have attention spans either, and they don't have time. They're short on time. They need the news. They need it fast and simplified. So I think that's another way. But again, it just goes down to the medium and where they're getting the actual sources from. Is it credible? Are they getting it from a credible journalist? Or are they just figuring it out on their own? So I think that's really important, that disclosure's there and the sourcing is there. Otherwise, what do you believe? It's a matter of, I'm short on time, but also there's untrustworthy content floating around left and right, especially today. So it's, where can I get trustworthy, credible news that I can consume where I need it, when I need it?
It all comes down to credibility. You have to. I mean, it's a agreement and trust. Audiences show up because they trust the content, and it's, they're there for some kind of, they're getting value out of something. So is it the food editor who's tried every single type of sea salt and therefore has real credibility when she or he makes a recommendation on a sea salt brand that she uses in her own life? There's trust there.
Media relations 101, basically. Everything we've learned in the onset in our intro to PR class in college is developing relationships. And that's really key with any industry, really. But it's also the case for influencers. We really make a point when we're working with an influencer to understand how they work, what they talk about, what works for them. So I think, is that kind of the same principles of relationship building, Michael? If you're pitching a campaign, is it all about relationship building, or is it an influencer? And, we might be the people to ask this question, but is an influencer easier to pitch than media? But is it the same principle, I guess, was what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. And I think that is often lost on marketers because they come from a traditional ad buying experience where you pay so you get control of the creative. And that's why I think people who are trained in media relations make better influencer marketers. That sounded exclusive. Certainly somebody who's never done media relations can learn it. But the skills that make someone a good media relations pro definitely transfer to influencer marketing, because you got to pay and you got to meet that you got to know how to negotiate and those skills that relate in the ad buying sense. But because you don't have control of the output, you also need to know how to analyze that influencer's audience, their voice, the way that they like to depict information. You're going to be much more successful. You could come in and be willing to pay the same price as another brand, but if you're not already presenting them the information in the way that they want to package it, you guys know they'll choose the other brand instead.
And this whole, think about the advertising side. Ads are static. Mm-hmm. They are one way. Influencer marketing and often traditional PR is human centered. So it's human influencer marketing is a human exercise. Mm-hmm. And where for you, for the advertising side, yes, they're very used to controlling every aspect mm-hmm. of it. When there's an influencer who is, there's all the variables that go into being in a human being experience. But what emerges though too is that storytelling piece, mm-hmm. which for traditional PR people and media relations people is kind of key. So is that where you see the connection coming in? Well, the understanding of being able to understand where the value of influencer lies.
I'd like it if that was the case, Cooper, but I think too much of traditional PR and media relations is still pretty transactional. Like, here's this one announcement blasted to a jillion people, cover it this way. Obviously the best PR pros, those who are applying best practices, understand the power of an ongoing narrative, not one hit, but a bunch in a row. And so there's a yes in the ideal sense to your notion. The biggest strength I think that PR people have when it comes to influencer marketing is thinking beyond the influencer's output, which is kind of like where an ad buyer would stop, and thinking about their audience and how that audience is used to interacting with this influencer, and recognizing, like, if I make her do this video in my way, they aren't going to watch it or they won't trust it. And that's why the influencer is going to throw up her hands no matter how much I pay her. But if I and you two are great at this, identifying the influencers who already match the brand voice and values, then it'll be a dovetail, and they'll give us even more of a lift than we're paying for, just like quote free media or earned media.
Mm-hmm. And that's why too, I think it's so important for brands to understand it shouldn't be a script that you're
Mhm.
sending through to an influencer. It should be those key messaging points and the call to action and the website to drive
Mhm.
them to. But then it's like, trust them to put it out there in their own
In a
words.
better way than you
And
could to their
exactly,
audience. Yeah.
exactly. Right. It's easy. Like, we are working on a campaign for a vaccine, and the creator who we're one of the creators we're working with did him talking to an AI version of himself about how should I share this with my followers. And it's really fun and clever, but it also hits on the key messages about the seriousness
Mhm.
of what he's talking about. So I thought that was a really interesting way, and I would have never thought of
Right.
that. And it's like, I don't think the brand would have thought of that either. So it's using that creativity and sharing that message in a way that the brand could never do.
Yeah. Great encapsulation. That's cool. You guys are working on vaccine stuff. That shows the versatility and depth of influencer marketing.
Yeah. We've done a lot more in recent years, especially post pandemic, with health related messaging or public awareness. We talked about one campaign about HIV awareness and resources for people to go to. And, a lot of that stuff we're doing, and it's really impactful. And that's not to say something where you're doing a transactional kind of driving sales isn't
Mhm.
impactful, but it's an interesting look at the influencer industry and how it's not so stereotypical.
Mhm.
We mentioned earlier talking about shoes and just clicking a button to buy shoes.
Mhm.
It's that, but it's so much more than that.
Right.
And to the political standpoint or whatever it may be. So it's really interesting how the industry has evolved in that way.
Mhm. I would say, like you said, kind of emerging. Doesn't need to push one side out or the other, but emerging in evolution.
Back to what we were talking about before in terms of this accuracy, if for a highly regulated industry, and vaccines certainly fall underneath that, is people probably don't understand how much goes on behind the scenes, how many hands are on that content, but the fine line of making sure that it's comes across as real to the creator and authentic to the creator, and it's their piece of art or work that they've developed, but adhering to the guidelines and all that goes into something that's so highly regulated, and what hoops you got to go through in order for it to be okay for public consumption.
Mhm.
So but that's where there's the credibility, but understanding that there's so much going on behind the scenes, that it's every single thing that's out there is as accurate as it possibly can be. So it's exciting to see that evolution for influencer as well.
So, Michael, do you think every PR pro should have an influencer piece to their overall communication strategy? And I know that's a very loaded question and it's very broad, but do you think at least considering doing influencer?
Yeah, definitely. Every PR pro should consider influencer marketing, especially if they've been resistant to it. Because as you noted, things change. Some categories it won't fly, like the aforementioned policy realm. It seems like consumer tech is stricter about accepting payment than seems like the rest of product coverage. But even something non-traditional like HR or legal could benefit by working with a consultant or a speaker who has a large following. Just to give one example where PR pro listening might not have thought about working with influencers just because they're not in lifestyle. And I definitely agree that being resistant to, quote, paying for coverage is way too much of a generalization. And the only person that's going to not get paid is that PR pro if they don't change their mind.
One thing that we find sometimes that always puzzles us is the brand or the PR people that we'll be working with. It takes some convincing for them sometimes, not all the time, to share the content that's created for their campaign. So putting it out on the brand's platforms, or putting it in newsletters, or just making sure that they are utilizing it as much as possible. So if a creator is creating coverage, creating a campaign on behalf of a brand, We often say to the client, you've got to share it on your
Mhm.
own platforms. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. What would you say to, I mean, it just seems like a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
If
So whenever I hear something that makes no sense to me, that I'm like, duh, I always try to put myself in their shoes and think, what could be a valid reason for that? I don't know that this is a valid reason, but at least it would be plausible to me that if they're saying, well, the whole reason we're working for the influencer is a third party um, credibility, and if they're seeing it on our social platform, maybe that takes away, makes her seem or him seem more corporatified. If they give that reason, then I would say okay. But my guess is, for the most part, it's just inertia, and it's the same clients that don't share their earned media hits either.
Mhm.
And because they're siloed, right? The social team is different from the media relations team or the influencer marketing team, and it's crazy, right? You paid for this great content that's more attuned to the type of audience at least you're trying to reach with that message, and all you need to do is amplify it. I did an inner circle masterclass with the VP at Edelman, who was over their analytics, and that was a huge part of their influencer work. A total best practice is they would do paid amplification. Edelman would pay for social media ads that would drive traffic to the influencers that they had engaged on campaigns.
Yeah. Cooper, did you have any other parting thoughts, or Michael, before we let you go?
You've asked me great questions, so I've been able to give across whatever thoughts that hopefully the audience finds valuable.
what have you seen in terms of the conversation around influencer, let's say pre-pandemic to now, and where do you think it's going to go?
So in lifestyle, which I'm broadly applying to the way that it's used in the media, I see traditional media relations almost getting all the way out of that business. It's all either influencer work or affiliate work, and but I still have plenty of followers / clients who are in the rest of the world, the rest of the markets and categories. Um, I think something's going to happen that's going to overwhelm this discussion, and that by the summer and beyond, we're not going to be talking about traditional media versus influencer versus content versus shared. All we're going to be talking about is generative AI, and no one's going to. There won't be labels. It'll just be like, oh my gosh, there's so much content in the world. How can I learn how to give better prompts to the AI to get better content? I don't know whether that means that you guys might actually be creating more content and selling that directly to your clients. I really think that, I think Deanna's seen this graphic that I had a designer create, where if you just boil everything down to a machine, a PR person's going to have a machine where their AI creates some sort of content that then uses AI to match it to a journalist based on their content. The journalist will receive it in whatever their machine's inbox it is. Their AI will, without them ever seeing the original PR input, turn it into content for their website, and the journalist will just read it and decide yes or no. I think that's not very far off. And then we'll have a whole round of people saying, I don't use AI. This is authentic, right? There'll just kind of be an arms race about who can be more effective and then authentic, and then back and forth.
As a parent of Gen Zers, don't you think those are going to be the folks that are saying we're sticking with authentic? They seem highly nostalgic.
Yeah.
And they like the way things used to be.
Yes, when we make conscious decisions, right? But how conscious are we about opening up an app and just seeing what's there? If it's whatever, wherever we get our news. So yeah, like a YouTuber, if it's an AI generated avatar, that may fall flat with people. But especially with text, I like. I know tons of people that will claim fake news about a topic that they know a ton about, But then the whole rest of the realm of the inputs that they get, they don't scrutinize those.
Mhm.
Sorry, Cooper, just took me down a rabbit hole.
No, it's
To your point, though, what I've been
Yeah.
saying for a long time, when people bring up the specter of AI taking away our jobs in the PR marketing space, and I still believe this is true, the more people get used to hearing or seeing content generated by a computer, the more you'll stand out simply by being human.
Mhm.
And I still believe that. Although the AI is getting really good at faking.
Yes. I know that you covered this a lot in the Facebook group.
Mhm.
That's been a big conversation too. So I'm very curious to see how the remainder of 2023 goes and beyond with this automation.
Yeah, but now that you bring it up, I think you're much better poised, and your influencers are much better poised than traditional journalists and traditional PR people, because of what you said. That's what they sell, is authenticity. And
Yeah.
they may be able to just increase their output by having some AI generated scripts and things, and then of course adding their own flair to it. And the same with your work. You can I'm building a training where I've been talking to different people in PR. It won't be long before you can either hire a programmer for like 2 weeks, or maybe someone will do this and you can buy their software that overlays on top of the GPT language model, and you can train it how to do a influencer pitch the motherhood style. And then all you plug in is the URL, and the AI will be able to write the pitch for you. And it will be just as personalized as if you did it one-to-one. And then if you do that, if you're ahead of your competitors, that will be a competitive advantage. But eventually everyone will do it that way, right? And that's where this
Right.
arms race to authenticity comes into play.
Yep. And incorporating the human touch with that automation, I think, is going to be key too.
Yeah.
There needs to be some gatekeeper to that.
Yeah, you definitely,
Yeah.
you gotta eyeball it, right? We've seen these
Yeah.
very, very funny, because I'm not working on the demo team, factual errors that come out. But I'm also, you can tell I'm deep into this, and the more I talk about it, the more it sounds like Skynet is coming. So I'll back off at this point.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining today. I know your time is limited, so we really appreciate it. And, for those watching and listening today, you can find Michael online, michaelsmartpr.com. I also want to plug your Good Lessons from Bad PR Pitches, because that's one of my favorite things you do. He writes a monthly roundup. And if you're in PR, the journalist loves to share the bad pitches that they get, which are very entertaining sometimes, but also it's like, okay, come on. There's a lot of us that are actually good at our
Right.
job. So what you do is you take it and you put it in a way that's you learn lessons. You take it and you learn from it, instead of being like, oh, that person's snarky. It's like, how can I take something away from this? So I really like that, what you do. So anyway,
I'm
I
glad
love
that's
that part.
hitting. Thanks. It's been a real pleasure to be with you guys. A real illuminating conversation, and I'm looking forward to hearing the other interviews that you've done.